Welcome to the Adaptation Funds course on gender mainstreaming throughout the project or program lifecycle. The gender mainstreaming course is split into 3 modules relevant to the different stages of the Adaptation Fund project or program lifecycle. This module focuses on the fully developed proposal stage. The objectives of the module are to be able to integrate gender mainstreaming at the proposal stage, understand the activities required for gender mainstreaming, and access templates and support. This module has 3 sections and takes 19 minutes to complete. You can pause at any time to apply part of the training, or take a break and return at your leisure. The Adaptation Fund and its implementing entities are committed to upholding the rights of all people and attain the goal of gender equality through empowerment and equal treatment. They strive to do so in an intersectional manner that acknowledges the complexity of gender-based inequalities, including systemic barriers and root causes. To achieve this goal, the Adaptation Fund projects and programs mandate to do no harm, thus avoiding creating or reinforcing negative impacts on women and vulnerable groups. And go beyond this to do good, creating opportunities for gender responsiveness and gender transformative actions. Gender mainstreaming should be evident throughout the design of a project or program and integrated into the full proposal. Section 1. Gender mainstreaming activities at the fully developed proposal stage. Adaptation Fund projects and programs must address concrete adaptation challenges and should provide equal opportunities for men and women, regardless of their background, age, race, ethnicity, religion, class, or gender identity. Within the full project proposal template, relevant descriptions and explanations of gender mainstreaming should be integrated in Part 1, further detailed in Part 2, and resources allocated in Part 3 to strengthen agency, build resilience, and increase capacity to adapt to climate change impacts and interlink challenges with gender equality. There are 7 steps recommended for gender mainstreaming when developing a full proposal. 1. Undertake a stakeholder consultation that includes women and addresses gender-related concerns. 2. Carry out a robust gender assessment. 3. Analyze and disaggregate the resulting data to identify all groups and areas that may pose opportunities or risks for the project. 4. Set gender-responsive goals and objectives for the project. 5. Develop a gender action plan. 6. Map the results to the Adaptation Fund's results framework. 7. Develop a gender-responsive budget in accordance with the planned gender mainstreaming activities. We will now go through each of these elements in more detail. Step 1. Implementing entities are required to meaningfully and comprehensively consult with stakeholders throughout all stages of the project lifecycle in a gender-responsive way. Stakeholders may include communities, vulnerable groups, women's organizations, and institutions with a gender mandate to identify specific problems, risks, and opportunities related to gender. Consultations are a rich source of information and will serve a key role in feeding the agenda assessment in Step 2. Full details of how to conduct a gender-responsive stakeholder analysis can be found in Module 1 of this course. Step 2. Gender assessment. Conducted either before or in parallel to the development of the full project proposal. A gender assessment is a tool for providing empirical evidence in the form of qualitative and quantitative data on gender roles, activities, needs, opportunities, and challenges within the project location. Its results are directly integrated into the project proposal components and implementation arrangements, including the budget and results framework. The full gender assessment is attached as an annex to the proposal. If a gender analysis has already been carried out as part of the concept note development, the gender assessment should build on this work. The gender assessment can be completed with relevant data gathered via a range of methods, including desk study via literature reviews, including government legislation, and research via projects, surveys, targeted consultations, or stakeholder consultations. Ensure to understand differentiated climate change impacts and adaptation capabilities of different gender groups and subgroups. For example, young or displaced women may face different obstacles to older or local women. Intersectionality is relevant to design interventions that are tailored to the needs and vulnerabilities of these differentiated groups. Top tips. Data can be obtained from updated and specialized literature. Where gaps occur, utilize research and stakeholder consultations. It is best practice to include traditional, local, experiential and/or Indigenous knowledge, and disaggregate all data by gender and, when possible, by other factors, including youth or Indigenous groups. During the gender assessment, Step 3 is the analysis and interpretation of the resulting data. Disaggregated data is broken down by sex and other relevant diversity factors. For example, a group of 34 farmers can incorporate different ages, genders, and vulnerabilities that should be highlighted. The data analysis should consider and answer questions relating to gender differences in climate change adaptation, namely climate impacts, divisions of labour, access to resources, and gender-based power structures. Data analysis establishes a baseline against which implementation progress and results will be measured. Gender assessment and data analysis key points. The gender assessment identifies opportunities for gender-responsive and gender-transformative activities and provides the analytical foundation for implementation and monitoring arrangements, including gender-responsive indicators. The data analysis establishes a project or program baseline. The next step is to develop gender-based goals and objectives from the results of the gender assessment. Note that the gender assessment should be undertaken by a staff member who is technically knowledgeable about the project context and background, with access to sector and gender-specific expertise, and time and resources to collect and analyse data. Local experts or consultants can support, but ultimately, gender mainstreaming is the responsibility of the implementing entity throughout the project cycle. Step 4 is to identify and integrate key gender goals and objectives. Goals are the overarching ambitions of a project and can be further broken down into objectives for planned activities and targeted beneficiary and participant groups. Objectives should outline the expected changes for different subgroups of men and women respectively, and refer to the target groups in terms of gender, as per the example on this slide. Goals and objectives, including gender-specific goals, are listed in Part 1, Project Objectives, and in Part 3, Section F of the Project Proposal Template. Step 5 is a Gender Action Plan to indicate concrete activities and resources to achieve the goals and objectives. The Adaptation Fund Gender Policy states that implementing entities should articulate corresponding gender-responsive measures addressing differential gender needs, equitable participation, and equitable distribution of benefits, resources, and rights as part of the overall project or program in the form of a specific gender action plan. On completion of a gender action plan, the indicators and targets are integrated into the main results framework of the project or program. The full Gender Action Plan is added as an appendix to the full project proposal. The Adaptation Fund's guidance document for implementing entities on compliance with the gender policy includes a template for the Gender Action Plan, which contains an impact statement identifying its main goals, an outcome statement that is specific and measurable, an outputs statement describing the proposed gender-responsive outputs. The Gender Action Plan also lists in detail the activities that will be carried out along with the corresponding indicators, targets, timeline, responsibilities, and costs for each activity. Step 6. Results from the Gender Action Plan are used to form a gender-responsive results measurement framework with gender-sensitive indicators that disaggregate data at the beneficiary and activity level to achieve the intended results. The results framework should strive to ensure intended outputs fully respond to the concerns, need, and capabilities of different gender groups and subgroups, equitable outcomes for different gender groups, and that targeted outputs are clearly specified. Overall, it should strive for a gender transformative approach. The gender mainstreaming approach is integrated in the existing results framework in Part 3, Section E of the project proposal template. Gender-responsive project indicators disaggregate data at the beneficiary and activity level to achieve the intended results. They should be specific, measurable, accurate, relevant, and time-bound. Examine approaches to positively change existing gender norms and power balances. Measure improvements in equality and ensure equitable outputs. And be disaggregated to identify subgroups and account for intersectionality. Gender-responsive indicators can be quantitative and/or qualitative. Step 7. Gender-responsive budgets allocate resources for gender mainstreaming and translate commitments into budget-assigned activities. A gender-responsive budget should provide adequate resources for all intended gender mainstreaming activities, benefit all genders equitably, include allocation of staff costs to manage, coordinate, and oversee the gender mainstreaming effort, and allow contingency funding for adaptive management if additional gender-related resources are needed during implementation. The costs identified in the Gender Action Plan must be reflected in the project or program budget. The budget with gender mainstreaming is listed in Part 1 and Part 3, Sections D, F, and G of the project proposal template. Here is an example of gender mainstreaming at the project proposal stage. Adaptation to climate-induced water stresses through integrated landscape management by the implementing entity, the Bhutan Trust Fund for Environmental Conservation. A gender assessment and gender action plan were developed for the full project proposal and identified specific gender gaps, including disconnect between water users and managers, as management of local water is carried out by women in the home, but by men at the community level, and women's lack of representation and decision-making. To address these gaps using best practice, the necessary actions were integrated in the project proposal budget and identified as either existing activities linked to the project results framework and demonstrating that these actions promote gender responsiveness in adaptation, or additional activities as identified by the Gender Action Plan related to gender mainstreaming. Section 2. Templates and supporting resources for gender mainstreaming at the fully developed project proposal stage. There are 3 supporting templates available at the project proposal stage. Project proposal template, indicative checklist for a gender assessment, and indicative gender action plan template. The checklist for gender assessment and the gender action plan template are both located in the gender guidance document located on the Adaptation Fund website under Knowledge and Learning, Knowledge Themes, and gender. The checklist provides a full list of key considerations to take into account when undertaking the gender assessment and analysing the data. The Gender Action Plan template covers all necessary sections of the Gender Action Plan. Key considerations for gender mainstreaming at the project proposal stage. A strong project proposal will showcase embedded gender mainstreaming throughout, including stakeholder consultation, gender assessment, and gender action plan, attached as appendices, aligned through the results framework, and with sufficient resources to be implemented, namely gender-responsive budgets. And all data and indicators disaggregated by gender throughout the proposal. UN and World Bank sites can support with reports on country-specific gender statistics, and further information on gender-responsive budgeting can be found in the UN Women's Training Manual on Gender-Responsive Budgeting. Section 3. Let's review our learning from Module 2. First, let's look at an example. Increasing the adaptation capacity and resilience of rural communities to climate change in the Central African Republic through the implementing entity IFAD. The full project proposal includes a gender assessment and gender action plan with recommendations including targeting beneficiaries including a quota approach, promoting the improvement of the rights of access to resources for women and marginalised groups, improving the participation of women in decision-making, and promoting youth employment and enhancing their skills. The full project proposal showcased best practice by including gender disaggregated activities, indicators, targets, timeline, responsibilities, and monitoring with allocated budgets. The findings of the gender assessment and the gender action plan are used throughout the project proposal, and they clearly acknowledge that the overall responsibility for the gender action plan lies with the implementing entity and assignment of a person responsible for monitoring and reporting gender compliance. In summary, this module covers that all projects and programs should promote gender equality and create opportunities for gender responsiveness and transformation. All fully developed proposals should be informed by a stakeholder consultation, gender assessment, and gender action plan. Gender-responsive budgets and indicators for monitoring and implementation should be in place to ensure gender mainstreaming can be actioned. Test your knowledge with this quick quiz. 1. Which step during the project proposal development stage allocates tangible resources to gender mainstreaming activities? Answer. Gender-responsive budgeting allocates tangible resources for gender mainstreaming. 2. Which steps should be attached as appendices to the fully developed project proposal? Answer. The stakeholder consultation, gender assessment, and gender action plan should be attached as appendices. And 3. Which steps should be used to directly inform the fully developed project proposal? Answer. All 7 steps should be used as a gender mainstreaming process to inform the fully developed project proposal. Thank you for completing Module 2 of the Adaptation Fund's Gender Mainstreaming course. Next, you can take Module 3 on gender mainstreaming activities at project or program implementation stage, including actions that need to be set up before the start of implementation, such as the grievance mechanism and regular review processes.